Well, I wanted to start off by just welcoming everybody to this event. We're super excited. Natalie and I, who are co-sponsoring the event, are really thrilled with our panelists. They're, people that specifically Natalie has worked with in the past and really admires their work and their work to help women specifically. So we're super excited to welcome them. So feel free to give them a little shout out in the chat, if you will, just a wave or say hi. First things first is we want to just take a moment to introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Allie, and I'm the founder of AIR, which is a women's cannabis club, new to the Denver and Boulder market. And our main mission through AIR is to create an inclusive, safe, educational community for women surrounding the consumption of cannabis. We're just getting started. We have tons of events and content and fun things lined up with the hopes of everything culminating in the launch of memberships in early 2021. It's nice to see from some familiar faces. If you're not aware of AIR yet, if you're new to the brand, check us out. We're at airclub.com. And I wanted to introduce Natalie, who is a fierce entrepreneur, super smart, very business brained. And I admire her a lot in the community that she's building for women in Denver. So wanted to introduce Natalie Levy, the founder of She's Independent. Natalie, why don't you tell us some more about yourself and She's Independent?
Absolutely. Before I jump in with a little bit of my background, if you're not on the panel or one of the speakers, it would be great if you turned off your camera for now, just so that the speakers can be visible. And then later for Q&A, you're more than welcome to jump back in. And thank you so much for showing us your faces in this time. It's great to connect with people. So yes, I'm Natalie Levy. I'm the founder of she'sindependent.com. Really excited to bring this event to you with Allie, with AIR. And She's Independent is a community aimed at empowering women, connecting women. We run educational content. We partner with community leaders. We basically cover the gamut from professional development and personal finance through to mental health and wellness. Marissa, who I'll introduce in just a second, is a wonderful addition to the team. We're really excited to have her on the healthcare side. And I would say, it's really important that as individuals who identify as women, that we're taking the time to connect with ourselves, connect with community, invest in health. And so that's what we're here for. So we'd love to connect with you if you have any questions. We'll talk a little bit about it later on, but I will pass the torch to Marissa to introduce herself.
Thanks, Natalie. So I'm Marissa Fay. I'm a functional nutritionist and a yoga teacher based in Denver, Colorado, but I work with women throughout the United States to really address and identify the root cause of the things that cause them dis-ease. So I like to really break those two words out because, sometimes the things causing us dis-ease are things that our Western docs may not be as comfortable addressing. So that's really my wheelhouse. And then I'm really excited to partner with She's Independent as a wellness coach with them, and also to do some community leadership around health and wellness topics.
Awesome, fabulous. And then let's go ahead and introduce the rest of our panel. We have Dr. Soyona with us today. She is the co-founder and medical director of PrimeHealth. Soyona, feel free to jump in.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I love using CBD with my patients for numerous reasons. So excited to get into it. But a little background on me, I'm a board certified family medicine doctor, but I'm also an integrative and functional doctor. So I do like to mix both conventional medicine approaches like medications with, as a first resort, using things like nutrition and lifestyle, supplements, things like vitamins, herbs, different nutrients, and even protocols for detoxification, gut healing, hormone balance, immune system optimization, which is where CBD can come in, which we'll get to. And our goal, at PrimeHealth is just to provide the best possible medical care that we can. And yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Annie, who is a primary care sports medicine doc. Annie, let us know what your specialty is and how you recommend cannabis to your patients.
Hello, everybody. I'm super honored to be here with such wonderful ladies and doing such good work. I've been in the industry for about 7 years now. I'm a primary care sports medicine physician, so I'm very interested in athletes recovery as well as primary care recovery, and in that way CBD and how we could use it to help our immune system, and in that way as well as help us with healing and getting us into an active shape. Super excited.
Fabulous. Yeah, really important work. Well, I think we should get things kicked off. I think the most natural place to start is actually the topic that makes me most excited for women, as well as non-female identifiers in regards to cannabis, which is something that I think is not talked about enough, but is essential to our experience, not only as women, but as women who are using cannabis to help support our bodies and our lifestyles. And that is the endocannabinoid system, which is really a foundational system that allows our body to interact with cannabis. And so, Dr. Soyona, I'd love it if you could walk through our attendees, what the system is, what it does, and its intrinsic link to the female reproductive system, as well as menstrual cycles and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So the endocannabinoid system, an easy way to say that is just ECS for short. So I'll just refer to it as the ECS now. It's basically a system that consists of endocannabinoids, namely the two that we know of at this point are anandamide and 2-AG. So I'll get to what that means. Endocannabinoids, the receptors that they bind to, and the enzymes that break them down. And so basically any cannabinoid is a substance that binds to a receptor within the ECS. And that can mean endocannabinoids, which are basically made in our body, cannabinoids, or phytocannabinoids, which are cannabinoids that are made from plants. So both endocannabinoids and phytocannabinoids, such as THC, CBD, or other compounds like terpenes, can all bind to these receptors within the endocannabinoid system and therefore make things happen. And so that's a pretty amazing thing to have discovered, is the fact that we don't only respond to cannabinoids from plants, but actually substances that we make intrinsically within our own bodies. So I think that's also a way that we can kind of explain to people how using things like plants like cannabis and terpenes, it's actually not like an artificial thing. Like, we're just stimulating a system within our body that already exists, just that much more. And so the couple of receptors that we're most knowledgeable about at this point are CB1 and CB2. And they're really located all over the body in pretty much every system that exists, where CB1 is actually mostly in the nervous system, so like the brain and the nerves, whereas CB2 is mainly found in the immune system and other organs like the gastrointestinal tract. And actually in the reproductive system, it's primarily a CB1, and those are the receptors that are going to bind to things like CBD if we take it to administer a response. And another thing that's really interesting is that when you take something like CBD, it's usually a full spectrum hemp oil, and there's so many different types, and we may go into this a little more later. You can get a full spectrum hemp oil that's primarily CBD or cannabidiol, but there could be like 100 up to 113 other cannabinoids in that hemp oil. So it's not just the CBD that you're responding to or that's binding to receptors. it's actually a whole plethora or a symphony. They call it the entourage effect of, all of these different cannabinoids working together to elicit a response. And
Yeah. What I think is so interesting about that process, and maybe not really well known, is, a lot of people think that THC is the end all be all of cannabinoids, and that it really runs the show in terms of flavor profiles, effect, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, like you were saying, Soyona, it's a combination of these different factors. So it's terpenes, which are actually the cannabinoid compound that gives cannabis its aroma and its flavor. It interacts differently with all of these other components, like your DNA, how high your tolerance is, and then the ratio of CBD to THC if you're using a hybrid. So it's a lot more layered, which is, I think, what makes it endlessly fascinating for me. Is it's so varied, and everyone's response is different, and I just find that fascinating in general.
And you're right, Ali. Not only I think that there's a big misconception between what THC and CBD do, and they could actually work together in a really good way. THC is the one that gives us most of the psychoactive effects in our body, but CBD can compete for those receptors that Dr. Soyona was talking about, and lessen those psychoactive effects of THC while still giving you the benefits of both at the same time. So that's and then again, to your point, Ali, everybody's definitely very unique, and this entourage effect helps everybody in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Can Dr. Annie or Dr. Soyona, can you talk specifically a little bit more in depth about the link between the ECS and the reproductive system, and what ways specifically CBD could support women in that area?
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely a link there between our hormones and the endocannabinoid system. Because what's interesting is that the cannabinoids, they don't only bind to receptors in the ECS, they actually bind to receptors that are outside of the ECS, like serotonin receptors, for instance. So they can actually change your mood and that's definitely something that a lot of women deal with around PMS is mood issues, maybe trouble sleeping. Generally, it's caused by an increase in cortisol. And that's a hormone that's an adrenal hormone that can cause a stress response in people. And so when that happens and you take CBD, there's actually this counteraction that occurs, which decreases what's called the sympathetic nervous system response, responsible for secreting cortisol. It decreases that response, and it increases the parasympathetic nervous system response, which is responsible for igniting like relaxation, healing, digestion, and not just relaxation in the mental sense, but even relaxation in the muscular sense, which is something that can help, let's say, in like menstrual cramps. There's a ton of cannabinoid receptors in the uterus itself. And so, when you take something like CBD, it's actually stopping the degradation or the elimination of your own endocannabinoids. So it's inherently increasing your own, endocannabinoids in your body. So that's the beauty of, I think, of taking hemp oil, is that it's not necessarily, acting from an outsider's perspective. It's actually just increasing your own cannabinoids, and you're just responding that much more to them. So that's a pretty amazing role that we have for hemp oil in helping menstrual cramps. Also, something that causes menstrual cramps is an increase in prostaglandin synthesis. And prostaglandins are basically an inflammatory mediator that causes pain and inflammation, and that's what is responsible for a lot of inflammation in the body, but specifically, menstrual cramps. And we may use things like NSAIDs, like ibuprofen or Motrin or Aleve, things like that, over the counter to relieve that pain, which it can definitely help, but it can also come with side effects, gastrointestinal distress, potentially even bleeding, depending on how much you're taking, potentially kidney issues. So using something like hemp or CBD, which also by the same mechanism of blocking the COX enzyme, which produces prostaglandins, you can actually have a similar effect, you know, so that's a pretty amazing thing that it can do for our menstrual cycles too. And I think that, you know, with everyone now, you know, on the call being offered the NED Natural Cycles line, you know, it's an incredible 4-product line that they came up with specifically for helping women through their menstrual cycle and using hemp oil and other botanicals as well. Because they have an herbalist on staff that actually came up with these formulas to help with the menstrual cycle and even in regulating it. So there's things like raspberry leaf extract in there that's been shown to increase fertility, stinging nettles and different botanicals that are super helpful for the menstrual cycle.
Yeah, super fascinating stuff. And I think, you know, what's anticipated in the future is, you know, more studying of these additional endocannabinoids and different terpenes and how they interact differently. And it's a really exciting future that I think we have in front of us as women. And I think that the offerings are only going to grow and become better and more suited to the female anatomy as we start to learn more and research, you know, about the plant. I'm curious, Dr. Annie, how, if someone's new to cannabis or they just haven't, you know, have had bad experience in the past, how do you recommend women start dosing initially? And then how can that change over time depending on their desired effects?
So of course we always say, you know, to start slow and then monitor. I mean, I think my biggest suggestion is always to start with the lowest dose, which usually for the CBD hemp oil is about 500 milligrams. So they even come even lower. But it seems like the average that's out there, it starts at between 300 to 500. And then, you know, keep a journal, and in that journal you can monitor how you feel. Again, because like Dr. Soyona said, your body starts producing some endocannabinoids as well. So you may need a little more, a little less as time goes on. But keeping a journal, I think, is one of the best ways to do it, and then starting low and increasing from there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think especially the benefits of CBD can be a lot more subtle than hybrids or THC. So I love that kind of like journal tracking. Marissa, I wanted to talk to you. A lot of your work centers around whole foods and integrating cannabis into diets. And so I wanted to talk and ask about, like, you know, once a woman has started experimenting with dosing, like what's the optimal method for ingesting or consuming cannabis, specifically CBD? And yeah, just curious to know what your thoughts are and how you know, recommend cannabis to your patients.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The first thing is really important. I want to make sure everyone heard it, related to something Dr. Soyona shared about all of the other compounds that are going to travel with something that is labeled as a CBD product. So the first thing I really try to impart to my clients is, how do you get the most out of the product that you're using? And there was kind of this marketing fad where a lot of hemp companies in particular would say like 0% THC, and they would try to say like, this is pure CBD. And we actually don't want just the CBD. We want all of these other properties that are going to travel with it, because it's going to increase our body's ability to absorb it and use it. So that's one key pointer here. Another pointer related to that, and what I call, and a lot of us in kind of this functional world call, is bioavailability. So how can you get the most out of your product, and how can you absorb as much as possible? Now, when we ingest it, so whether you're taking an edible or using a tincture, automatically, because it's going to go through your digestive system, it does slow it down a little bit, is kind of the way that I think about it. So we really want to do everything we can to maximize. And frankly, I'm a thrifty gal. Like, I want to get the most out of my money. And these products, when they're really great, are not inexpensive. So one tip that I always share with my clients is to consume it with fats. So cannabinoids are fat soluble, which means that to really optimize your body's utilization and digestion of it, we want it to travel with fat. So I think Allie is sharing it in the follow-up email, a recipe that I came up with that has these hemp balls that have lots of yummy fats in them that are really healthy for people with uteruses in particular, because fats really help to regulate our hormones. So consuming your product with a fat is going to maximize, again, that absorption, which is really great. And then I also like to remind people, don't consume anything cold. So I'm a nerd on gut health. It's one of my very favorite things that I work with folks on. And so I always am trying to impart, like, how can we be as kind and kind of loving to your digestive tract, which sounds like so woo, but like really actually we can see this analytically as well. And so by making sure that you're consuming either the product or whatever you're consuming with it is either room temperature or a little bit warmer, you're going to get more of the benefits. Your product's going to go a little bit further.
There's also some new products now that are nano micro, so they have better absorption. And I can send you guys some information about that as well.
That's
Could
awesome,
you say that
Dr.
again, Annie? It was a little hard to hear you. What was that last point?
No, that there's some new technology also coming out that has full spectrum, but it's nanotechnology, so the bioavailability is a little higher, and they dissolve a little quicker. So there's some products that on the line that I'm working on that we have that, and I'll share you guys the link afterwards.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think that especially for beginners, fast-acting technology can be a really good solution to understanding how your body reacts to cannabis, specifically hybrids and THC, because you have the full scope of the effect that you're going to reach. I know some brands say is in small of a time frame as 20 minutes, and you don't have to wait 2 hours to feel the full effects and reap the benefits. And I think it's just an interesting way to interact with the plant, and also while also most importantly avoiding getting too high, getting really just too much THC in your bloodstream. Is that I think that's one of the benefits of these fast acting technologies. It's pretty much a seamless process. Very cool. Marissa, you wanna?
Yeah. So I think we're going to turn the conversation, just based on the fact that we're a room full of people with uteruses, to something in particular that we see amongst people like us, and chat a little bit more about the use of cannabis with autoimmune diseases, and in particular with the immune system. So Dr. Soyona, will you share some thoughts with us?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a really exciting area of research. There's a lot going on in looking at CBD for improving the immune system for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because autoimmune diseases are rampant and they're only increasing in propensity in our world. And there's a lot of reasons for that, from the chemicals that we're exposed to, disrupting our immune systems, to, stress, food or franken foods, that we've been consuming or, kind of marketed to consume for many years. Like a lot of different reasons why our immune systems are kind of like going haywire. It's basically an autoimmune condition is when your immune system starts attacking parts of itself. So a couple examples would be like rheumatoid arthritis, where your immune system is attacking the joints, or multiple sclerosis, where the immune system is attacking nerves in your brain. And so, there's some really interesting research on how CBD and hemp and different cannabinoids can actually help alleviate some of these conditions, which is exciting because, autoimmune conditions mainly are treated at this point with immunosuppressant medications. So basically things that suppress the immune system from functioning normally. And that's not necessarily the best way to handle something like this. We'd rather, address root cause or help give the body signals to be able to start behaving in a more normal fashion, which is sort of what CBD and hemp oil has been shown to do. So the immune system has a plethora of different types of cells, T cells, B cells, macrophages, mast cells, for example, and they all have cannabinoid receptors on their surfaces, meaning that they're going to respond to cannabinoids, whether that be endocannabinoids or phytocannabinoids taken externally. And so that's kind of the background of why it's affecting the immune system in the first place. But one of the amazing things that I've researched is on multiple sclerosis. And this is generally a diagnosis that medical marijuana is recommended for, like pretty much across the board in all the states that are able to make those recommendations medically. And multiple sclerosis usually presents with weakening of muscles, issues with nerve conduction that can lead to even like numbness, spasticity, decreased mobility. And it's actually been shown that close to 65%, so like the majority of patients with MS already are using cannabis, whether it's prescribed or not, because they see how it improves their symptoms. And CBD in research has been shown to improve range of motion, fatigue, inflammation, even depression, probably because it's working on that serotonin receptor to an extent, and spasticity. So it's definitely something that you want to consider when you're treating anyone with MS, any type of neuropathic syndrome, because CBD has also been shown to help with neuropathy, basically pain from nerve damage, which can be from an autoimmune condition or even something like diabetes. And then the other thing on the topic of the immune system is how cannabinoids actually interact with our gut. And that is something that I think is really important to highlight, because the gut actually is where the majority, around 70 to 80% of our immune system cells are created. So within the lining of the gut, we have the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, and that's where a lot of these cells that I mentioned before are coming from. They're actually produced in that tissue. So the way that the endocannabinoid system responds with the gut is also intricately involved with how it responds to the immune system. And one interesting study showed that with people with inflammatory bowel disease, things like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, it was shown that they actually had less anandamide, one of the endocannabinoids, in their gut, in their digestive tract. So they actually it seems like they're making less endocannabinoids. And so some people actually call that by a name, clinical endocannabinoid deficiency. And so there's also been implications for irritable bowel syndrome and fibromyalgia, both also difficult to treat conditions without overt cures or anything like that. But if you assume that these people are having somewhat of an endocannabinoid deficiency, you could actually treat them with something like hemp oil to build up their endocannabinoids at their receptors and therefore cause an improved response. And so that's, I think, the reason why through studies we've seen that IBS and fibromyalgia, for instance, they do improve in terms of their symptoms when treated with hemp oil and CBD. So those are some kind of highlights of why the immune system kind of responds to hemp oil and why I tend to recommend it in so many of my patients, because the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Soyona. I have some thoughts too, but I want to see if Dr. Annie has anything to add there.
I would just add that I agree with Dr. Soyona in the sense that it's the medications that are out there for diseases that are autoimmune, like MS, they help decrease your immunity in the system, so the body doesn't attack itself. But then you're super exposed to other diseases, including COVID or any normal pneumonia that wouldn't normally get you sick. So it could be very counterproductive to use medications for something to decrease your immune system, right? So using something like CBD that helps not only improve your immune system, regulate your own body, it definitely makes more sense.
Yeah, that was something for everyone who's watching. We talked about yesterday about, do we want to bring up COVID? And it's just so relevant. And this is definitely one of the points of it, right? Is that exactly what you just shared, Dr. Annie, that a lot of these medications that are used to manage autoimmune conditions are really suppressing the immune system. And something great about a CBD or a hemp product is that it's not going to have that same effect. So that's awesome. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to add one thing. I think it's important to note that, since the onset of the pandemic and probably, likely well before that, is researchers are looking into ways that CBD can help people who contract COVID. It's definitely not an approved treatment, but there is some thought that it could be used, and again, much more research is needed, but that it could be used as an adjunct treatment in addition to some other more traditional based modalities to help decrease some of the inflammation that COVID causes in the lungs. But again, like all of the stuff that we talk about, specifically that AIR talks about on social media and when we talk about in our events, is that so much of this is not understood yet, that we're very much at the beginning stages. We know a lot, but we need to know so much more. So I just want to make it super clear that like cannabis, while being researched, is not at this point an approved treatment for COVID. Just want to throw that out there so that everyone's safe.
Yeah, and in general, oh, go ahead.
No, that there is 2 studies happening right now, one in Canada, one in Israel, and it's so much a lot more space is needed, but it is showing benefits as an adjunct to therapy, but more research does need to be done. But to Soyona's point, it was more that you don't want to increase or suppress your immune system in order to be more vulnerable to other diseases in general. But I mean, CBD and THC in some states are still both federally legal. So it's something that even hemp oil in a few states is still considered federally legal. So it's not something that we're going to have a lot of research of. So this is something that we're going to have to, like I said, write a journal, kind of self medicate, and talk to your nutritionist, talk to your family medicine doctors and your primary care doctors, and see how you could formulate your own benefits from this oil.
Yeah, thanks for that, Annie, or Dr. Annie. And a great segue there are 2 things. One is just a reminder that the conversation we're having tonight is in no way giving you personal medical advice. So everything that we're sharing is for educational purposes, and we invite you to consult with your personal health team. And I know all of us are happy to answer questions afterwards if you have any specifics for us, but just a reminder there. And this brings up a great point, which is something that I know we all agree on, and that's really important for me that we express, which is that we have to address the root cause. And so, the products that we're talking about have amazing applications and can be really helpful. And especially in this way that we've talked about autoimmune diseases and conditions is, really digging a little bit deeper and finding someone that you trust to work with, because oftentimes these are triggered by, it can be things like parasites, it can be things like mold in your home, it could be a traumatic event, it could be something else that's going on with you genetically or that's in your environment. So these products are fantastic and amazing, but make sure that if you're really dealing with something that requires more attention, that you're giving it that attention. And one thing for me that I see in my practice a lot is the use of these products for sleep in particular, and anxiety, which I see travel together a little bit, especially right now. And yeah, giving a wave, right? Like I know I have recently, giving waves from those of us who have maybe relied on some of these products right now with the struggles in that realm. And something I've really found with a lot of my clients is that starting low on the dosage, like I think Dr. Annie mentioned, but also knowing that you're probably going to have to titrate up to find a dose that works for you. But if you're using it every night, eventually kind of it's going to have to be more and more. So I think using these as tools really intelligently and integrating them to your life when you need them, depending on kind of what you're using them for. So this is specific in the case of something like sleep or anxiety. But I want to just open the floor up to our other experts because I saw some people lean in because they might have things to add on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of my patients come to me already experimenting with CBD because it's so easy to access at this point, you know, especially in Denver. So yeah, I mean, people are definitely using it for anxiety and sleep, and they see that it works. I mean, I honestly used some NED CBD last night because my mind was racing for whatever reason. And honestly, it was like, I mean, it's magic. Like it really helps me so much. And I'm not going to say that everyone is going to respond that way. They won't. You know, I definitely have patients that they say they tried it and literally feel nothing. And, you know, maybe they already have like saturated endocannabinoid receptors and that's not the issue, you know, that it's possible. But in general, you know, CBD is going to activate GABA receptors as well. And GABA is what relaxes us. You know, that's the same receptor that things like Xanax, you know, benzodiazepine, like really strong medications act at that same receptor. So yeah, it's definitely going to be helpful for anyone going through a hard time with insomnia or anxiety.
And to your point, Soyona, I think that, and there was a question I think on the chat about, you said that there was a lot of different types of oils out there and it's easy accessible, but the one thing to mention is to make sure that that there's quality control. Like I think it was Soyona, Soyona said if there's mold or in quality control in it. So I think that when you do go buy your CBD products, look at a company like NED or Endocannabinoid or a company that has third-party testing and that they're checking for pesticides as well as mold or and they're doing or bacteria as well.
Yeah, totally agree with that because it could make a lot of things worse if you're coming in contact with those things depending on what's going on with your body.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say like that should be the number one thing that you look for when trying to find a CBD brand. I think a lot of us, especially if we see really cute packaging and, you know, claims of certain kinds, that we're drawn to that. But the most important thing with anything that you put into your body is safety, number one, and transparency, number two. So how much information does the company share with you with what's in the product? What kind of, you know, what level quality products do they include? Is it organic? You know, and I think that these are really important things for women to know because there is, and I'm sure you ladies can agree with this, there are a ton of crappy CBD specifically products out of the market that just do nothing. But it's, you know, when you integrate some of those practices all the way from the cultivation stage through, you know, handing it over to the consumer is, you know, the more information that a brand shares, the better. And just really educate yourself on the things that you're putting into your body.
Yeah, I see a real trend of it being added into a lot of personal care products. And that when they do that, they really aren't saying what their sourcing is. So this is definitely something where like you should be paying for a quality product. And if you're not like noticing that this is something that like is you know, something where you're investing a little bit in, then it may not be the quality that you really want it to be. Again, because of all these receptors in your body and how your body's going to absorb it, you really want to be picky about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a question for our two doctors. I wanted to ask in terms of now that we've mentioned COVID, is what kind of, you know, when we talk about all these things like the side effects that women and men are experiencing throughout COVID, the pandemic, as well as, you know, the uprest that we've been experiencing justly through the Black Lives Matter movement. And I wanted to see if you've seen any change in your female patients in terms of, you know, what they're reporting symptom-wise. Do you think that symptoms are elevated or exaggerated because people are under so much stress? So yeah, just curious to know what you guys have been experiencing with patients.
I mean, I could definitely start, but for me, I mean, I think anxiety, right? It's a big one. I think I heard one of my patients who said who put COVID with allergy season right now, right? So here I'm in Miami, and here we have the Sahara Desert dust coming in, and so people have a little sniffle, and then everybody freaks out and thinks they have COVID. So I mean, the anxiety level and there's definitely higher, which makes things worse, and the immune system go down, at least from my side point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've kind of seen things across the board. Like people are dealing with this in so many different ways. You know, from like you're saying, like anxiety and, you know, issues, you know, getting out, getting, you know, proper groceries and, you know, feeling safe to be going about your day. I mean, those are definitely things that have changed. For the negative, on the positive side, you know, it's been a helpful pause for a lot of people. And a lot of people who still have jobs, you know, for those people that are fortunate to still have work and have income, you know, they are kind of getting to work from home more and like focus on their health a little bit more. And it's like this kind of slowdown that that a lot of people needed, you know? So it's kind of like you've got two sides of the situation where it could be, and then everywhere in between. So
I know that doesn't sum it up.
If I can, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really quick, I mean, I know that Soyona just painted a lovely picture of what it can be, but speaking as a single person, I actually will say that the mental health stresses and pressures, and I'm very open about this conversation, with the ongoing pandemic environment, it is tough. And the isolation and so many factors. I mean, I think that CBD basically has gotten me through so much personally. Acute anxiety, grief, loss, you name it, this environment where I did start getting in my head. So yes, Soyona, I totally understand where you're coming from with people can have this much needed reset, but I think a lot of people, or I know a lot of people are getting in their heads and are very stressed in these times. So I want to make sure anybody who's listening, I mean, don't think that it should just be all bright and cheery because you have time off. We know that it can be very stressful. And by the way, we're here to talk about it if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. One thing I wanted to add to this conversation that I think is important is how you consume it. And in particular, when we're talking about COVID, I know for me personally, I don't recommend people inhale it. Like, again, because of the respiratory component there, but obviously if you're inhaling a cannabis product, it is going into the bloodstream very quickly. So there are drawbacks and perks. But personally, just in my profession, I don't feel good about informing and recommending people inhale it on a regular basis. But I wanted to open it up and get Dr. Soyona and Dr. Annie's opinion on the best mode of delivery for folks, maybe now, given what's happening in the world, but also in general.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
I mean, it depends on the patient, right? So for me, for the weekend athlete and the weekend warrior, the ladies who want to go out and cycle and things like that. I mean, I think for me, I like the creams a lot in that sense, just for pain, muscle aches, and things like that, as well as the tinctures for the immune system through the gut. But I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like musculoskeletal injuries, like putting a direct topical cream or gel or, you know, something like that. I think that's a fantastic way of delivering it locally. And then for things like, you know, pain that's in your uterus, for instance, you know, in that Ned Cycles line, they have a topical one that you can rub actually directly over your uterus, which I find to be really nice. But then they also have the tincture, so you can kind of get it from both angles. I think the tincture is great. I mean, that's the one that I most commonly recommend because it is faster acting than a capsule. But Onda does make amazing, you know, gel capsules too. So I like that too for a longer acting approach.
Yeah, I have a bonus up level for folks, depending on how open you are to exploring new things. But for things like cramps with your menstrual cycle, I like to do a topical and then do a castor oil pack on top. for just a little extra, seal it in, absorb it. And I'm happy to nerd out on that. If you have any questions, I'll pop my email address into the chat, but that's a little asterisk if you're really a go-getter.
Yeah, actually on AIR's last event, we were talking with some female owners of cannabis-based self-care lines, mostly for the vagina, and we got a real hot tip that if you have really bad cramps, actually if you use tampons, take a tampon and kind of rub it in some of the salve or in some of, some other formulation that's safe to put up inside your vagina to really get the most impact in the place that it needs the most, the quickest.
Oh, that's a great idea. And actually Liz, hi Liz, she just said that she uses vaginal suppositories. I would love to know which one, like what brand she's used, if you could write it in. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Foria. Foria is phenomenal. We actually talked about that a lot during our last event as well. And they have really great offerings and lots of different modalities for using cannabis. If you guys are unfamiliar with them, if you suffer from anything from pelvic conditions to really uncomfortable periods or, having painful sex with a partner, they are a really great place to start and have a lot of options for women.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Very cool. One thing I did want to mention was I wanted to play a little bit of devil's advocate before we hop into some questions. But I will say that some methods of delivery are essential to certain communities of women. When we talk about women, specifically like chronic pain sufferers or people within like tremendous amounts of pain, whether it's due to an underlying condition or treatment that they're receiving, is sometimes even during the time of COVID, of course, at your doctor's recommendation, but sometimes it is important to use other methodologies to get the cannabinoids in your system, specifically inhaling and using concentrates, really compound the cannabis benefits into like a really tiny ingestible amount. And because they go almost immediately into your bloodstream, that a lot of women that are, in super high levels of pain, just as an option, they can't remove smoking. So I think the best thing to do is like practice safe smoking habits. Don't share with anyone. Make sure you're cleaning your device if you're using one, and probably log, like Dr. Amy was saying, log your symptoms, log how your smoking is impacting your overall health. And there might be moments where you have to take a pause, step back, but just, wanted to insert that comment in because I know a lot of women are under those special circumstances and not smoking is not an option for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great nod to being informed, right? So learning about the options, figuring out what might work best for your body, maybe working with a practitioner or somebody who's informed who can help walk you through some of that if that's an option for you. And more than anything, right, like feeling empowered that you're making a choice that's benefiting you and that you're informed about how that's impacting your body.
Absolutely, that's essential. I know we're running out of time, so I think we should take the next 5 minutes to answer some questions. Anything that we won't get